The Lucknow Pact. A glow of nobleness comes into the story of Indian affairs with the beginning of the 1914 war. Leaders of both Congress and the Muslim League rested their differences and promised to help the government. Rulers of native states pledged their support in arms and money, and within a month of war being declared, 70,000 Indian troops embarked to serve overseas. Before hostilities ended in 1918, more than a million men were to sail from India to the various theatres of war. Congress put a price on this cooperation. In December 1914, the members resolved that, in view of the profound and avowed loyalty the people of India have manifested in this present crisis, the government should take such measures as may be necessary for the recognition of India as a component part of a federated empire, in the full and free enjoyment of the rights belonging to that status. Jinnah no doubt agreed to these demands, but the war did not divert him in his quest for Hindu-Muslim unity. When he spoke to the Bombay Muslim Students' Union on 13 February 1915, he directed the boys to the virtues of discipline and self-reliance. He deplored racial discrimination and urged them to cooperation, unity, and goodwill between the Mohammedans and other communities of the country. He appealed to them to do away with dissensions with all their might. 6 days later, Gopal Krishna Gokhale died, Jinnah's only close and dear friend. In later years, Jinnah recalled his liberal and broad-minded statesmanship and spoke of him as a great Hindu and as a tower of intellect. When he referred to Gokhale 3 months after his death, he confessed his sorrow and grief, words that were unusual in his cold vocabulary. From this time, Jinnah's story can be told without mere conjecture and without having to hunt for elusive clues. He was now a maker of history, and the facts of his political life from 1915 to the end are told in newspapers and many books. He remained what he had always been, logical and honest, and forceful to an extent that intimidated people when they came near him. His only faults were his parsimony and the sharpness of his tongue. In all else, he belonged to the great tradition of political leadership. Mrs. Naidu wrote that the death of Gokhale had brought Hindus and Muslims close together in a bond of common loss and sorrow. She believed that the time was ripe for a more direct and definite reapproachment between the two great communities. In December 1915, Congress was due to hold its annual session in Bombay. Jinnah, with the approval of leading local Muslims, sent a letter inviting the members of the All India Muslim League to hold their annual session in the same place and at the same time. This brave move was in line with his own liberal political creed. 28 years after, he recalled his aims at this time. He said, "Undaunted hope sprang eternally in my heart and soul. I was not going to give up." He wished neither to absorb the League into the Hindu dominated Congress nor to weaken Congress by exposing it to the sectarian character of the League. He wished only for unity, and he was supported in this by a number of moderate leaders in both communities. Enough for him to hope that the dream might come true. Jinnah had to endure cynical and violent opposition from extremists in both Congress and the League, also from those few Britons who still believed in the motto divide and rule, who thought that Britain's strength in India depended greatly on the political differences between the two communities. Now Jinnah had to turn aside momentarily from the big issue of unity and try to reconcile the antagonized elements within the League. Their load of prejudices might have made him despair. Some believed that as the League was pledged to self-government within the empire, they should not marry with Congress, which was anti-British at heart. Others argued that the League should disband, because Turkey, the home of the Caliphate, was now allied to Germany in the war against England. Jinnah appealed to them. "We are bound by our constitution, reverence for and obedience to that constitution, and discipline are absolutely necessary qualities to enable us to say that we are fit for real political franchise, freedom, and self-government. At this juncture, we are watched not only by India but by the whole of the British Empire, of which we aspire to be an independent, free, and equal member." He asked, Can we not bury our differences, show a united front? It will make our Hindu friends value us all the more and will make them feel more than ever that we are worthy of standing shoulder to shoulder with them. The Muslim League met in Bombay on 30 December 1915 in support of Jinnah's appeal that differences should be buried. Three Congress leaders, Dr. Annie Besant, Mrs. Sarojini Naidu, and Mr. Gandhi sat with him on the platform. Gandhi had lately returned from South Africa, greatly satisfied by his success as a reformer in having removed injustices against the Indian colony in Natal. This first attempt at showing a united front might have been discouraging for Jinnah. Long before the meeting began, 50 police officers took up their places within the hall and outside in case there was disorder. There were a few hooligan outbursts at the beginning of the session, but the audience settled down and listened. On the second day, there was uproar, and in Jinnah's words, the meeting was broken up under the very nose of the police. He believed, he said, that it was with their connivance that the trouble began. Jinnah and his supporters had to make their way from the bedlam within the hall and conclude the meeting in a room in the Taj Mahal Hotel. Mrs. Naidu wrote a record of the incident, of Jinnah as the dauntless soldier of unity, risen to the heights of an invincible patriotism, of his proud and splendid indifference to all personal suffering and sacrifice, heedless alike of official dissuasion or favor. She referred also to the aggressive machinations of his opponents. The enthusiasm with which the Indian leaders had committed themselves and their people to the war had now begun to wane. The postponed Council of Indian Bill, for which Jinnah had visited England in 1914, had emerged the following year as the Government of India Act of 1915, to which the royal assent had been given on 29 July. Almost every reform had been hoped for was omitted from the act, and the arguments presented by Jinnah when he was in London had been ignored. He remained loyal to the British cause, but after these disappointments, his plan for unity and reform became more lively than ever. In April 1916, the month when Lord Chelmsford replaced Lord Hardinge as Viceroy, Jinnah had the satisfaction of seeing a joint Congress and Muslim League committee formed to discuss the irreducible minimum of reforms they should demand from the government. He continued to grow in stature and power. In the autumn, he was again elected to the Imperial Legislative Council, and in October, he made a long speech at Ahmedabad, which revealed more statesmanlike ways of argument. He summed up India's part in the war, he repeated his views on reform, and he spoke of the demand for separate Hindu and Muslim electorates, which was another hurdle in the path of unity between the two communities. He said, "As far as I understand, the demand for separate electorates is no a matter of policy, but a matter of necessity to the Muslims, who require to be roused from the coma and torpor into which they have fallen for so long. I would therefore appeal to my Hindu brethren that in the present state of position, they should try to win the confidence and trust of the Muslims, who are, after all, in the minority in the country. If they are determined to have separate electorates, no resistance should be shown to their demands." Then Jinnah returned to his chief crusade, self-government for a united India. "A new spirit is abroad," he said. "It is young India, who, to put it in the words of Lord Morley, leave our universities intoxicated with the ideas of freedom, nationalism, and self-government, and have to be satisfied." Then he said, "Among the many benefits that have been conferred upon India by British rule, perhaps the greatest of boons, albeit an indirect one, which India has received at the hands of the English people, has been the birth of a genuine spirit of patriotism. But for a real, new India to arise, all petty and small things must be given up. She is now India irredenta, and to be redeemed, all Indians must offer to sacrifice not only their good things, but all those evil things they cling to blindly, their hates and their divisions, their pride in what they should be thoroughly ashamed of, their quarrels and misunderstandings. These are a sacrifice that God would love. Jinnah yielded to neither the heroic compliments of Mrs. Naidu nor the machinations of his opponents. In December 1916, he succeeded once more in prevailing upon both Congress and the Muslim League to hold their annual sessions in the same place at the same time. They met at Lucknow, with Jinnah presiding over the League and achieving his first great victory as the ambassador of Hindu Muslim unity. During his long speech, he said, amid the clash of warring interests and the noise of foolish catchwords, no cool headed student on Indian affairs can lose sight of the great obvious truism that India is, in the first and the last resort for the Indians. Of the separate cause of the Muslims, Jinnah said, we want no favors and crave for no partial treatment. That is demoralizing to the community and injurious to the state. The Muslims must learn to have self respect. Then, towards the Hindus, our attitude should be of goodwill and brotherly feelings. India's real progress can only be achieved by a true understanding and harmonious relations between the two great sister communities. There was no reason for Jinnah to suppose that this was a pipe dream. The sessions of Congress and the League closed in warm assent. Both agreed as to the irreducible minimum of reforms, first discussed by the Joint Committee in April, and this decision was passed on to the Government of India. The chief domestic problem of separate electorates was also overcome. Congress heeded Jinnah's appeal. They won the confidence and trust of the Muslims by agreeing that in certain provinces in which the Muslims were a minority, they should be guaranteed a proportion of seats in the future legislative councils, in excess of the number they could otherwise hope to win. Muhammad Ali Jinnah was given credit for these harmonious decisions, and from this time his name was proudly associated with what came to be known as the Lucknow Pact. He had reached the first peak of his ambitions. Dadabhai Naoroji's disciple had become a leader of united India.